On this episode of Building Men, no longer bound by the chains of my past. Today I have a deep conversation with a man who has been through hell and back and has used the trials and tribulations in his life to motivate and inspire people who are dealing with their own demons. I think you'll appreciate the level of authenticity and transparency displayed by my guest, Alex Bales. Alex is a personal trainer turned transformational life coach who specializes in helping people overcome addiction and emotional trauma. His mission is to help people evolve and to create a life they love again. Sit back and enjoy the ride. Thanks for listening to the Building Men podcast. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Meralda. When was the last time you focused on self-care and the holistic health of your body? GM Revolution is a men's skincare line with a mission to introduce men to proper skin health. GM Revolution offers 5 skincare products that act as one to give men exactly what their skin needs. Whether you struggle with acne or you're looking to prevent fine lines, GM Revolution works hard to strengthen your body's largest organ, the skin, to fight as your body's first line of defense against your environment. Using code BUILDINGMEN, one word, you can save 15% on all of GM Revolution's products and start seeing the physical and mental benefits of skincare. GM Revolution encourages you to be the revolution in your own life. Now, back to the Building Men podcast. Hello and welcome to the Building Men podcast. My name is Dennis Meralda. Building Men is geared toward helping you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So this journey that I'm going on now with Building Men, since I started doing interviews, I started in, beginning mid-April when I started interviewing people, and it's opened up my world to so many amazing individuals. And one thing that I've realized going on this journey is the thing that I'm the most attracted to as far as wanting to learn and understand are people that have gone through what I like to call the hero's journey, where they go on this journey of self-discovery where they, they're living life one way, and there's this moment where they find themselves in this depths of despair and they need to figure out a way out of it. And there's this learning that happens. It's a big moment, and then they come and they prevail to help other people out that are behind them that they can kind of help pull into this new realm. And so the gentleman that I'm going to interview today, that I'll talk to today, reached out to me a couple weeks ago. And in my discussion with him, I realized that he has absolutely gone on a hero's journey. And I'm so excited for the audience to get to meet this man and really be inspired by him. I know we had a brief conversation, and I was certainly inspired by him as well. So I'd like to introduce the audience to basically a traumatized former addict, addictive personality, was probably addicted to many different things in his life, who turned it around. He's now a personal trainer and basically considers himself a transformational life coach. So I wanted to welcome Alex Bales to the Building Men podcast. Alec, welcome aboard.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so grateful that both that you've given me the opportunity to be here and for the service that you're providing for men all around the world. I think it's so awesome and so honorable.
So Alex, I'm so intrigued with your journey. And from the first time that I talked to you was really, since I probably have had, 20, 25 guests on over the past, few months, you were the first person that really asked me, hey, what can I do to make this the best episode possible? What do you need from me? What can I do? And I thought, I kind of took a step back and I was like, that was really interesting that you thought on a deeper level, what you can bring to the table. And so basically I told you, I said, listen, be you and just put it out there. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll go on this journey together over the next hour or so. And so the way I wanted to start the interview, Alex, was to just have you take us from the point, start your story wherever you want. You can pick up your journey wherever you want, points that you think might be important for the audience to hear about. Take us to the point where you found yourself in that low spot. I think we've all gotten to that point where we're looking in the mirror and we don't understand or don't recognize the person in front of us. So start your journey and bring us to the point where you didn't recognize yourself or you realized you needed to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to make this as clean and concise as possible. But, my journey, a lot of people find like they're balanced, like just through some people find it through moderation, a straight line, but my life's just zigzagged all over the place. So I'll try to make this as concise as I can here. As a kid, I was always super shy, super sensitive. So I can remember like being in kindergarten and I would have to go to like the social worker office because I would like go to class and cry because like I wanted to like go home and I was like super anxious and scared. I couldn't ride the bus because I would get on and I would have like anxiety and panic attacks. So, this is my baseline starting out as a kid. So, I continue to grow up and I didn't have a bad upbringing. I had a pretty good upbringing, to be completely honest with you. But again, just super shy, super sensitive. Actually found some confidence in sports. So I just happened to like be very athletically gifted. So that actually helped me to gain some confidence. I was very involved. I was a 3-sport athlete. Fast forward, I was getting recruited at a very young age for both baseball and football. So I spent basically my entire childhood like traveling around for baseball, training for football. I had a personal trainer from the time I was young. And I was like, my whole dream, like I was going to play Division I sport, preferably football. And fast forward to high school, I came into contact with a coach that actually later, a few years after I graduated, got fired for being verbally abusive to the athletes. And so, like I said, I was super sensitive, and I lettered in football at a real big high school that puts out a lot of Division I talent as a freshman. So as I got older, I switched over to defense and I had to deal with this person. And it really took a toll on me. He would, berate me and he would say things to me. And I fell into this really, really deep state of depression and apathy. So as like a 17 or an 18-year-old kid, you're like super impressionable. You don't really understand like your emotions yet. You're just trying to find yourself. So, I remember I would go to school and I would like sit in study hall and like just put my head down. And I just felt like detached from everything. I didn't even end up playing my senior year. My mental health got so bad that my parents actually had to like cut it off. And they didn't even let me, go out for football at that point. I still ended up going away to play college baseball at a small school. My performance had dropped so bad that because this guy was actually also the head baseball coach. So I'm dealing with this guy in both sports. So my performance dropped so bad that I just ended up going away to a small school to play. 2 weeks in, I got what's called Epstein-Barr virus. So Epstein-Barr virus is like an extreme version of mono. To make a long story short, I was sick for a year and a half. I had to transfer home after one semester. It turned into chronic fatigue. I had surgery. I lost 50 pounds. And this obviously didn't help the matters at hand. And I still had a big hole in my heart that I hadn't dealt with and didn't know how to deal with. So I transfer home. I start going to school at just a local community college, and I'm doing some work. And I have a friend of mine that's like, hey, we aren't playing sports anymore, but he's like, I've been dabbling with like testosterone and anabolics. And he goes, this might be like a new hobby for you, like to get into like bodybuilding and powerlifting. Like you were always a good athlete. And I was like, it was something to do. Like I had nothing going for me. So I dove in, and little did I know how much of an addictive personality I have. And it's super ironic because I never partied or drank growing up. I was actually the kid that was always against it. Well, like any addiction starts, it's just one more time every single time. So basically I ended up cruising on steroids for about 2.5 years, never coming off. And really looking back, I don't know if I could ever say I was truly addicted to the steroids, but it was a gateway for other things to come into my life. It really opened up a can of worms, so to speak. So during this time, I was also failing basically all my classes. I just wasn't even going. I started partying quite a bit. I started drinking, started using Coke, then got into amphetamines, got into a nasty relationship that was verbally abusive, both on my end and hers. I left my home and went and lived with her family. And she also had a parent that was also, an alcoholic, and the whole thing, like you mesh a bunch of people with a substance abuse problem and emotional issues together, and it turns into a disaster. So I ended up leaving that relationship, came back home. And so I started using activity to fill the void with everything. So I got like a really good high paying job. I was always like a really functional addict and alcoholic. Like I always had the ability to do things. I just would just do just enough to scoot by. So I would do that. I was training jujitsu. I was going to school and actually doing well again. But I put all my value in all of those things and not in the way that I felt about myself. And eventually I ran myself into the ground so bad that I woke up one day and I stood up and actually fell back on my bed because I was so exhausted that I was like detached from my body. So I was always a substance user. I would kind of go off the rails and then I would get sober for a little bit. And then I would go on another bender and then I would get sober for a little bit. But at this point, now I had nothing left to do but to face myself, and I could not stand the pain of looking myself in the mirror. So I really start using heavy. So I would go to work, I would come home, I would drink 2 bottles of wine and a whole bottle of NyQuil to sleep all day. I would sleep all day long. And then what I would do is I would use Coke to wake me up. And then I would use like amphetamines or whatever I could get my hands on. And it became this vicious cycle. So I'm falling deeper and deeper, down the rabbit hole. And eventually I just get to a point where I can't even deal with it anymore. I'm just so sick and in the hole that I'm like, I don't really care anymore. I'm just going to end it all. I was suicidally depressed and I thought my life, it was just time to end it. And I started to plan it. And, I'm a very spiritual person, but at that point I had lost all faith in anything, including myself. And in my darkest moment when I was going to do it, a voice came over me and it felt like I just felt so loved and so cared for. And it, you could call it my higher self, God, whatever it may be, but it was like, this will be the best thing that ever happened to you. You have the opportunity to start over and to rebuild yourself. And now your pain's going to become your purpose. So, that's my story in a nutshell. I tried to hit all the main points there, but yeah, that was my rock bottom and turning point.
So if I'm watching this movie, Alex, I mean, you just went through, it's a 3-hour tearjerker. I mean, we just went through an hour and a half of that movie in 7 minutes for you to build up to this point. So as you were talking, I wanted to start with, you mentioned that you were anxious in school. And as a former teacher, coach, and principal, I definitely see that with a lot of kids, especially more recently. Anxiety is something that rears its ugly head early. Yeah. So typically as an educator, as a school leader, your attention is drawn to the kids that are a little more assertive, aggressive, kind of outgoing, they demand more of the attention. The kids that need a lot more of the attention are the ones that are more introverted, that are dealing with that anxiety. When you're thinking back to that, you said, getting on the bus made you anxious, like being called on in school made you anxious. Even my son, he's 16 years old now, but he was really anxious about taking the bus to school. He was always anxious about the first day. There were things that would come up, new experiences. Do you think that, you had some kind of, I wrote down hole in your heart, that's something that you said your friend talked about. Can you think about that even at a young age, and maybe, I'm trying to think of the best words to say this, that you were missing something in your life that, made you go inside and, you were anxious about, life in general? Do you feel like there was something that was missing? Maybe it was friendships or family, or that you were seeking validation, you couldn't find it, so you went internally?
Sure. So there's a few things that come to mind right there. So I think the first thing is that I was always uncomfortable with the fact that I was super intuitive and empathic as a man. So, I think as a guy, we're taught that we always have to be, tough and, stable and rational. And I wasn't that. And some of that too. The other thing I was thinking was that I kind of had a mom who was the leader of the household, and I love my parents, but my mom stayed at home with my brother and I, so I was always kind of pushed in the direction of, get in touch with your feelings and how does that feel to you, and that's all fine and dandy, but it kind of created problems in me connecting with other guys, especially as a kid. So I think that's where that sensitivity comes from. But again, I think most of that is really just me being comfortable with my gift. I'm like a super intuitive person. super empathic. I'm super caring and compassionate for people. And that wasn't always cool as a kid. So I didn't fit in with like the guys that were like playing with cars or like,
Right.
you know, having like sword fights and things like that. Like it just wasn't my thing. And I don't consider myself like a feminine guy now, but at the time, like I kind of thought that that was the case. And I thought that something was wrong with me. So I think that that's where a lot of that anxiety stemmed from.
And there's this yin and yang that happens between masculine and feminine energies.
Absolutely.
But what happens is, I think young men, especially, you start to question, if I'm not being aggressive, if I'm not, trying to do these dangerous things and sword fighting and throwing rocks at animals or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe is there something wrong with me during that time? And we haven't talked about this when we were doing like our pre-meeting. Did you ever question your sexuality within that? Like, were people calling you, oh, you're gay or you're homosexual because you weren't doing the things that were traditionally masculine?
Um, yes and no. This is a question I wasn't expecting. So
Yeah, well,
awesome.
I don't have questions scripted. I told you, I just go from our conversation.
Yeah. I don't know if I really questioned it as much, but I know that some other people did. And I think that fucked with me a little bit as a kid. Especially too, because I was like I said, I was a super good athlete, but I'm like this super shy, sensitive kid. Like I would like, sometimes honestly, I'd like cry at practice and stuff. It's like, it was super freaking embarrassing for me as a guy. But yeah, that's an interesting question. Wasn't expecting that one. So you caught me a little off guard.
Neither was I.
Yeah, that's cool though. That's cool though. Yeah. I guess it does make you question yourself too. I mean, like you contemplate these things, but no, I'm into women. But yes, it was definitely questioned though by certain people at certain times, actually by women more often than guys, believe it or not.
Yeah. And the only reason I had asked is just because there's this anxiety, and you're super empathic and intuitive. It's something where even my younger brother is very much in that way too. He's 14 years younger than me, but he feels things on such a deep level. But we talk a lot about that yin and yang with masculine and feminine energy. And he is like, you would look at him and he is a man's man, the way that he physically appears, but he has more feminine energy in the way that he feels into things. So it was just interesting to me. I remember growing up, if I did anything as a young man that was counter that, typical traditional male role, people would make fun of you. And when you were called, a name that would, anything to do with homosexuality, it was seen in my generation as that was a dig on you. Like that was something that, really they were trying to get at you by saying something like that. And so I'm just trying to piece together, like from going from where you started with the anxiety to an addictive personality, like was there a hole that you were trying to fill in some way, shape, or form? And now I'll fast forward a little bit, Alex, to so now you're in high school and you're a really good athlete, and playing sports. It's so interesting the role that coaches have. I'll speak from my own experience on young men, and it could be in such a positive, uplifting, motivational way. Conversely, it can also be such a detrimental role that a coach can have on a young man. And I mean, the vetting process, was this coach that you mentioned, was he a teacher in the school as well?
Yeah, he was. And he wasn't just like that to me. So like all kinds of things came out against this guy. Like he was also doing that to his coworkers in the same department at work. And yeah, it was a big mess. Yeah, he was a teacher, and a very popular one at that point. And not so much by the students, but by the administrators. Like he was in with the administrators,
like the good old boys club or something like that.
Well, yeah, and how ironic when he got exposed that our principal also left.
Interesting. Yeah, because he was probably giving him great, evaluations and reviews based on his performance. And when you have someone in your life, a lot of the conversations that I'm having, I focus a lot on schooling. I think in these formative years, trauma plays such a huge role. When you're experiencing traumatic events, these adverse childhood experiences, when you're experiencing several different things as these formative years between the time you're born until you graduate high school, when there's several of them that are happening, it increases the likelihood of obesity, of depression, of addictive behaviors, of suicidal ideations as you are an adult. So when there's
Yeah.
a lot of these things going on, and that's why I'm kind of digging a little deeper here, because I'm so curious. So, you had this anxiety that you were dealing with. You had a coach that was a total asshole. He should have been there like picking you up and lifting you up and motivating you, but he was doing the exact opposite. So I picture you in study hall, like with your head down, you're probably like, I don't want to see this MFer. I want to go to practice, and you're gifted in sports, but he kind of sucked the life out of you.
Mhm.
And I could relate to that. I remember my basketball coach in high school, would shame me in front of not only the rest of the team, but we would get big crowds at basketball games. And I remember I didn't want to make a mistake, not because I didn't want to let the team down. I was afraid of the wrath that was about to come, and the embarrassment that I
100%.
knew I would feel based on it. So I shied away from a lot of big moments
Mhm.
in fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
So now you have
Yeah.
your experience too was with this guy who is constantly kind of chipping away at your self-confidence, your motivation. You went from being, I'm going to go play D1 sports, which that was one of my goals as well. So now you're like, maybe I'll hang on to college and I'll do something. Was there any other thing in high school that you can point to that, or, maybe your educational experience that you would look back and say that event really shaped me getting into this addictive cycle that I was in?
No, you know what? I can just tell you straight up for a fact, his role in my life is the reason I ended up where I was. It's the biggest pain for me. I think back of it and I have trauma around it. Sometimes when I look back on it, I still find myself judging myself for the way that I acted then. I thought there was always something wrong with me. And I'm not a victim of it. I'm actually so grateful for it. Like if I saw him now, I would actually give him a hug, because I would think that he just needs more love in his life. And he probably had the same thing happen to him. But at the time I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know what to do moving forward. So I think that that's just the biggest pain point. And so that right there, it caused like a butterfly effect. So like my performance dropped in sports, my performance dropped in school, because I always hung out with the jocks, because that's where I spent all my time. When my performance dropped and I was super apathetic and depressed, I stopped hanging out with friends. I lost all my friends. Literally, I would sit in my room and I would ask myself, what the hell is wrong with me? Why does nobody like me? Why does nobody care about me? I felt like I was alone on my own island. And again, that turned out to be such a blessing in disguise, because I learned how to eventually deal with my emotions and my thoughts. But yeah, just that experience, just with that one person, it basically is the root of all my trauma. I've been to therapists to deal with it, and it's helped some, but ultimately, I think we can only fill the void in our own heart. And just doing the work on myself has really helped me to overcome that too. And for a long time, I thought, we always hear about toxic masculinity, and my relationship with this individual kind of led me into a point where I was like trying really hard to be like the traditional man. But I don't believe in like toxic masculinity in like a traditional sense at this point. It's more like, we need more masculine men, because masculine men aren't verbally abusive towards people. Masculine men take care of their family and their friends. Masculine men take care of business and share and love and are compassionate and are caring. So, that's my real thoughts on the subject. I know I kind of veered off a little bit.
Well,
I felt like that was a super important thing that I wanted to share with you based on the last couple of things you said.
right. Yeah. It's something that I'm really interested in, is just people's definition of masculinity. On this journey with Building Men, what I'm trying to do is come up with a succinct definition of that term. And every single person that I talk to has their own idea about what masculinity means. When you look it up in the definition, it's traits associated with being male.
Yeah.
And what the hell does that mean? Because this coach that you had, who berated you, who set you on this downward spiral in your life, had traits associated with being a male. I'm sure he did, but that doesn't mean that he's a masculine man. I mean, I would argue that to the day that I die, that what he displayed was any kind of masculinity. So
Yeah.
the fact that you said you would love to give him a hug and thank him for the journey that you went on, that truly shows your level of empathy towards another human being that was, like, you identify as the root of a lot of the issues that you went through. I was going to ask you if you had an opportunity right now to talk
Yeah.
to him again, what might that look like? Or would you ever consider just writing him a letter and even just reading it out to yourself to kind of help you heal in that process?
Yeah. So that's one thing I've done. Now, I don't know where he's at currently. I don't, keep track of that. He doesn't take up much headspace in my mind anymore. But
Yeah.
one thing I learned from being an addict, I used to go to AA all the time. I don't really subscribe to that thinking anymore. But anyways, one of the things you do in AA is you take a personal inventory of all people, places, and things that you feel like disdain or offended towards. And then what you do is you either go back and you make amends with them in person, or you write out like a pretend letter to them and then you read it to your sponsor. So that's actually something that I've done, and that was super powerful. But I would love to have a conversation with him in person. I actually talk to my family about this sometimes now, and I'm like, part of me says if I saw him, I would really have to try hard to not just go up to him and punch him in the face and be like, what are you going to do now?
Exactly.
But on the same token, I know that in my heart, I just don't have that in me. And I think I would just say to him, you know what, it doesn't have to be a long thing. I would just simply say, hey, this is what happened. This is how you made me feel. I'm not coming to you asking for an apology. I don't need it. I just needed to express to you how I felt and just let you know that I forgive you for my own sake. And I hope that you forgive yourself. That's
So
it.
deep.
That's all I need to say.
Yeah. And that's all any of us can ever do, right? Because we can't control, and ultimately it's up to us how we take in information and we decide to feel about it. But as an impressionable 16, 17-year-old, that's really challenging to do. I know as a 44-year-old, that would be tough for me to do right now. So now, you go through this experience in college, and your goal was to play D1, and you're playing Division III baseball, or a smaller school, which I did the same thing. I played a Division III baseball as a pitcher in college, and it wasn't where I had hoped to be. But I also, looking back, I didn't put in the amount of work that really I should have. I wish it's one of those things I wish I knew then what I know now, and I would have been able to work a little bit harder. But again, I look back and also thinking whatever I did led me to where I am right now, and I'm
absolutely
really content. And so going through that experience, you said you had the Epstein bar you mentioned, where that kind of set you on off in a direction where your physical health wasn't where it needed to be. So you also had this buddy who was like, hey, why don't you try some horse tranquilizers in your ass? Maybe that'll be where you need to go right now. So you decided. Do you think that there was something in that specific moment that you're like, you know what? I'll try it. I'll try steroids. I get it. Maybe I can become a little bit better physically, and I could look a certain way. And you're like, I need to try steroids, and that led you to another path. Or, and this is a deep dive now, if that same buddy was like, yo, man, let's go get an 8-ball and let's fucking snort some coke and get some whiskey. Or if he was like, yo, there's this shit called meth that would blow your mind. Do you think you would have gone in any different direction at that point? Or do you really feel like it was steroids was the first thing and then the next thing and the next thing?
No, I think that we're all being guided. And I think that that's exactly how it had to play out for me. Looking back, I built a big body to hide the insecurity that was going on inside of me. Again, a lot of it comes down to being uncomfortable with my own masculinity. So I thought if I built like this huge, big, strong body, and I was like super impressive, that somehow people would like me better, or that I would be more comfortable with myself. I kind of wanted to be intimidating and scary, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
I thought that was the way things were supposed to be. And I thought that those guys were impressive at the time. And really now I look at it and that just shouts insecurity. But I think that that's exactly how it had to play out for me. I wouldn't change it for a second. I think that it was the perfect path for me. I know that sounds crazy, but it was the perfect path for me.
I totally get where you're coming from in that direction. And so it started off there. Was there a moment then that you can recall where you went from steroids to the next thing, whatever that next thing was? You said, maybe it was cocaine or amphetamines, where you're like, okay, I'm doing this and I kind of see the benefits that it's having to my body, but then going into a direction where now these are mind altering things that you're doing. Was there a specific thing in that moment where you're like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do this because this isn't the next level shit? Or you're just like, fuck it, I'm pushing all my chips in and I'm going to try everything out now?
Yeah, I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, I'll give it a try. And I remember the thing for me was like, I would take amphetamines, or I would do cocaine, and I would feel more clear. I would feel more comfortable with myself. And for the first time, I would love myself. So really at the root of any substance issue, what you're really doing is you're giving yourself permission to love yourself. I know that might sound unconventional, but if you think about it, the alcoholic is using the alcohol to fill the void. The drug addict is using the drug to fill the void. So when you're using these substances, you're just using it as an opportunity to connect with who you are. So I wasn't actually always somebody that went out to like parties and crazy dive bars. The scariest thing for me was that I would do it and I would sit in my room and I would like write or connect, and I would actually be honest about like what my dreams were and how I felt. For me, it was an opportunity to actually connect with myself because I didn't have the ability to do so in a sober state of mind at the time.
So as you take yourself back to that point in your life where you're writing down, you know, your dreams and your goals, what was Alex, who was fucking high on whatever, what was he writing down? What were the things that you would recall saying this was a goal or this is a dream?
Yeah, so it sounds arrogant. I guess I've always kind of wanted a little bit of like fame and notoriety, especially because I had that at a young age as an athlete and I lost it. Honestly, I think I just wanted to feel comfortable with myself again, and then be able to give back to other people. That being said, I couldn't even help myself at the time, so I don't know where that came from. Maybe it came from the desire that I wanted to be able to help myself in hopes that eventually I could do the same for other people. But yeah, I used to just dream of being able to actually give back to people. So I always said that if I was like a millionaire, I'd probably give 3/4 of it away. I'd pay off people's student loans. I'd buy people things close to me. I'd give to charity. Like I always just wanted to give. And ironically, I would never allow myself to receive though. You know, I just, that's just how I am. I don't know. But yeah, I would dream of giving, being able to give and help as many people as possible. But I couldn't help myself at the time.
Right. And that's the tricky part. You talked a little bit about your thoughts on that were unconventional in nature, you know, that maybe what you're about to say is unconventional. What I also found a little bit unconventional, and I'll ask you to kind of address it, is you talked about AA and you said, you know, you went through AA, but you don't subscribe to that approach anymore, which might push people as being unconventional, where this is like this proven program of mentorship going through when you have a sponsor that has been there, done that, and now they're kind of helping guide you through these 12 steps. So in your opinion, while that's, you know, you don't subscribe to that approach anymore, what would be the approach that you might subscribe to help someone that's struggling with an addictive personality, being addicted to drugs, to alcohol, to porn, to whatever it is?
Sure. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So I think AA is actually fantastic for getting people initially sober. Where it goes wrong is that people get addicted to Alcoholic Anonymous, and it becomes their religion and their cult, and they become completely reliant upon it. And what I teach is self-reliance. So, you know, a lot of times you'll hear people at AA meetings, or even I've had therapists say to me, you should be content with just staying sober in life. And I say, fuck that. You can go out there and you can turn your pain into purpose, and you can find something that you're passionate about. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you're just passionate about being a good dad. Maybe you're passionate about building a business. Maybe you're passionate about, you know, being healthy. So I think a lot of it's a lot of self-care for me. It's about replacing the old habits with the new. You can't go to the future living with the same habits that got you here in the first place. So, you know, I know we talked about I kind of have like a staple system. I call it my 4 tenets of health, which I've actually changed to 5. And really what that is, do you have a spiritual practice or a holistic practice that leaves you connected? How's your nutrition? Do you get enough rest? Do you get enough exercise or movement? And how are your relationships? So what we do is we just do slow behavior change over time. Typically what I like to do is I like to just focus on one little thing in each category for maybe 4 to 6 weeks and then add another thing. And what happens is slowly over time, it actually becomes fun and effortless because you're watching yourself evolve and change. And you're like, holy shit, like I'm not bound by the chains of my past. I get to create my own reality. Like this is amazing. So I'm really looking to shift people from like a place of like scarcity where they're thinking like, this is what I have to do, to being more like contemplative and being like, hey, what could I accomplish? Like, what if I could make my dreams come true? What if I try this instead of this direction? Like, that's a good space to be in.
And I can't wait to figure out to get from that point. So I asked you to start telling your story. And I said, stop your story and let me jump back in the spot where you kind of had that moment where you're like, where you had to look at yourself in the mirror and not understand how you got there. I can't wait to figure out over the next couple, minutes or whatever, how you got from that spot where you said you had considered suicide. You had suicidal ideations. You went from a spot where you were a good athlete, you went to college, and now all of a sudden, after all these different addictions, you find yourself in a spot where you didn't want to be around anymore. You were using whatever it was, whatever drug, alcohol, just even to make yourself feel again, where there was this void in your life. So now you're at the spot. I don't want to be around anymore. You said that you had this kind of moment where there was this higher calling, higher power, whatever it is, your more enlightened self.
Yeah.
You felt this love and you felt this, all of a sudden you found out what your purpose was. So now start there. And I want to, now we're on this hero's journey again, like where we started. And how did you get from there to where you are, where you developed these 5 pillars and you're helping people? So walk us along that journey, Alex.
Sure. So, geez, I can remember when I first got sober, it was just the desire to change. So I think I can remember sitting in my first AA meeting with the bar that I would go to here and there down the road and being like, all right, well, I'm just going to head down there right after this meeting gets out. But I think for the first time in my life, starting out, I allowed myself to receive help. I realized that it was okay to be vulnerable and it was okay to be honest. And I got the help that I needed. I had somebody sponsor me and we worked the steps. And once I got out of that foggy haze, which took about 90 days or so of getting through like anxiety attacks and an identity crisis, I remember I got into meditation for the first time. I remember like I would sit there and for the first time I could actually like think straight in like 8 years. And so I started like connecting to who I authentically was. And I started journaling a lot. Like I would just write down like the honest truth about what I felt every single day. And I would contemplate, like I'd ask myself, like, what do you want to accomplish? Like, what are you here for? What feels good to you? What feels light? And I would move forward with that. But I think the most powerful thing I have, the most powerful tool in my toolbox is just to surrender. So I used to get down on my hands and knees and I used to just say, God, whatever you have for me today, whatever is in the highest good, please just show me the path and I'll do whatever it is that you have for me or whatever it is you want me to do. And just surrendering to that and asking myself, like, just questions like, when I was confused, what would love do now is a powerful question. Or what is in the highest good? Or what feels good to me? How can I help others? And I would just slowly move in that direction. I had none of us really know what we're doing or where we're going. We're just trying to figure things out as we go. So I just learned to trust myself. And I started just going through things. And there were empty roads. I got into pickup artistry because I wanted to understand women. So I did that for a while. And I got into yoga for a while. And then I got into meditation for a while. I explored Buddhism and different religions. And I just kept trying things. And I took a little something from like a million different places to a point where eventually I've just reached a place where I realized I need none of it. As long as I've come to terms with life on life's terms. And I've just come to realize that as long as I have myself and as long as I feel good about me, there's nothing that can hurt me. So everyone thinks that because I'm a trainer, that my passion is health and fitness. And that couldn't be further from the truth. My passion is self-love self-care and mental health, because everything in your life could fall apart. Like you could lose your relationship, your house, your job, your body, but nobody can take how you feel about yourself away from you. And that's the most powerful thing.
So as you're talking, Alex, what I recognized is, and this is a kind of a deep dive into, psychology. You had this void in your life. You had a hole in your, somebody said it, a hole in your heart. And for such a long time, you were using outside influences to fill that hole. However it got there, it was there. But what you started to realize was the way that you would fill that up was you started understanding things on a deeper level. And so you tried different things out. You tried yoga out, you tried meditation out, you tried journaling out, you with physical fitness, your nutrition. Slowly but surely, as you became more confident in who you wanted to be, you were kind of, filling in the hole that was in there. And now you have this abundance of love that you're giving to other people because that hole doesn't exist anymore. You were able to fill it with good, and you want to do good by other people. So it's really an inspiring story, because there's so many of us out there that have this feeling, this void, whatever it is, this feeling we're not totally complete. And I wholeheartedly believe, to use that saying, is we need to look inside first, like recognize that is there, and then start to see what can we like slowly, incrementally do to start filling that ourselves. We can't look externally. We can't look for external ways to fill voids within us. We'll be better for other people when that hole is filled, right? But we can't look for external validation, whether it be a fucking joint, whether it be a fucking bottle of booze or a blowjob. It can't. It has to come from something inside of us.
Absolutely. I look at life now as my spiritual laboratory. I had a mentor say to me, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So that's my philosophy of life. I just look at things as a learning opportunity. I try things. Sometimes I fall flat on my face. Sometimes I try things and they work out perfectly. I don't have expectations. Expectations, in my opinion, just create misery. You can't control things. So I just choose to move in a certain direction, to trust myself, and then just to allow things to unfold. And just believe that things are going to work out in the right direction. That's just kind of how I go about my life. I've had to learn. So when I initially got sober, I kind of developed like some weird habits. So like some OCD, like some control issues, a lot of, honestly, I've struggled with sex addiction and like way too much porn watching and masturbation. I've struggled with binge eating because just I have those addictive traits. That's just who I am. So I've just had to learn to just let go and trust. And it's been so powerful for me. So yeah, life is my spiritual laboratory. I'm always just looking at things in a higher way.
So I'm just writing down spiritual laboratory. I don't want to forget that saying. So I'm going to take a step back, one more step back into that hole before we, totally climb out of it. You mentioned before that you were in a relationship that was abusive in nature. And so I just want to kind of close the loop on that idea of, so now you have this addictive personality, you're abusing different things. Do you feel that you were looking for someone that almost filled the role of your coach from high school, that you needed someone to almost abuse you in that way as you were trying to fill that void yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's funny because I dated the same person over and over and over again. And she just happened to be the person that I got engaged to. But yeah, it was just a reflection of what was going on inside of me. And I think that things continue to show up in our life until we fix the problem. So I just hadn't learned the lesson yet. And it wasn't just that she was toxic. I was toxic. It was nasty on both ends. And I take full responsibility for that. And I'm so grateful for it. But yeah, it was just a reflection of what was going on inside of me. It was very similar to exactly what happened with my coach. And that's another thing that really got me into the men's movement and masculinity, was because she was like a radical feminist. So nothing I ever did was good enough, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of unimportant, at this point. But basically, yeah. It was just a reflection of what was going on inside of me. And yeah, it turned out to be the best thing ever.
So from that relationship, or those relationships that you had, and you were looking to fill that void with the same type of person that you were with. How did that help you understand how to show up in a relationship now? I mean, not only a relationship maybe with a significant other, but even relationships that you have with your clients, with people that you're coaching.
Sure. So a lot of the issue was trust. I used to be a disgusting freak, and I would look through her phone, and I was always creeping on her and seeing what she was doing. So I think the first thing is just learning to let go and just to trust another person. So love is not control. And a lot of people make that mistake in relationships. You don't need to own somebody to love them. To love somebody is to support them. So that's how I show up in my relationships now. The other thing I've learned in relationships, and this might be a little controversial, but it's super important to me, is that your emotions are oftentimes irrelevant. It doesn't matter how you feel. When you show up in a relationship, you're making a compromise and a deal with that person that you're going to support each other. So with my girlfriend, I'll just show up. Some days I'm depressed, some days I'm happy, but I'll even say to her, like, how can I support you today? What can I do to best make you feel or help you move forward this week? So I think it's just about showing up and trusting the other person and just saying, like, no matter what's going on with me, I've made a firm commitment here to be in a relationship with this person, and I'm going to do my best to support them, because I would hope, even though I don't do expectations, that they would return the same in favor.
I think that that's a really powerful point, and I would add to it just being able to be like uninhibited and vulnerable in the same way. One
Definitely.
thing, it's just being able to say, this is me. This is the real, raw me. I'm not going to try to be perfect. I'm not going to try to look or sound a certain way. And once you can do that and you can kind of let go of those expectations of yourself, I feel like you can truly let someone in to see who you are and to be able to support each other in that way, and not have this preconceived notion of they're supposed to act this way or they're supposed to be this way. Just being the true, authentic you for each other.
Absolutely. Like, I think a lot of people in relationships, they try to act like they think their partner wants them to act. Whereas, like, with my current girlfriend, we've been together for a year and a half now. And when we first started dating, I said, I'm a drug addict. I don't go out and drink and party. These are what my goals are. This is what I'm going to be doing. I really like you, and I'd love for you to come along for the ride, and I'd love to support you. But this is who I am. This is where I'm going. So I'm just going to be authentic and honest about it, and we can move forward. Or, no offense, if this isn't right for you, we can also just leave it right here. And I think that that's just a great way to handle things, just being honest and authentic about who you are. I agree with you.
And so now turn that into your relationship with people that you're working with. And I want to hear a little bit more about, you mentioned those 5 pillars, I believe that you said.
Yeah.
How do you take that idea about, how you want to show up in relationships as you're working with clients, and talk to me a little bit about, what that process or program looks like?
Yeah. So when I'm working with clients, the first thing I do is it's important for us to all have a dream. So I get in touch with that and I ask them, like, first off, like, how are you feeling? What's been going on in your life? What got you to this point? Do you have a dream? So that's kind of at the top of the hierarchy. And then I look at, like, the 5 pillars as a branch down from that. Like, okay, so how are your relationships from here? Like, what's going on with those? Are you in a healthy relationship? Are you seeking validation? Just things like that. How's your nutrition? Are you fueling your body with good food or bad food? Are you getting enough movement that you're stimulated without annihilating yourself? Are you getting enough sleep at night with the rest? And do you, most importantly, and this is the one I'm the most passionate about, is do you have a spiritual practice? Because if you're not connected and you're not whole, I don't really think there's any purpose or meaning to life. So just
Now, take that, Alex, and so you have an opportunity to go back in time, and when right before your buddy talked to you about, getting on the juice, you have an opportunity now to coach you, however many years ago that is. What's your conversation with yourself like? So now you're like, I'm gonna go try steroids. I'm gonna get on that path because I I'm interested in doing that. If you had an opportunity to coach yourself with those things in mind that you created, what would you say?
That's a good question. I think that I would say that this is, I would say that you don't necessarily need to do those things, that we can fill the void in your heart by just working on yourself and creating a lot of self-love and self-care in your life. That being said, I probably still would have given myself the option to do those things. I think that it's super important for us to fall on our face and to hit rock bottom. So I know that that's not probably the answer you were looking for, but I think that I needed that, and I think that a lot of people need that. So a lot of times, when people work with me, they've already hit rock bottom, and now I'm the one who builds them back up. So that's kind of what I do. I think that going on that path and going down that path where you just fuck yourself up is the best thing that will ever happen to you. So I'd say let it happen.
It's so funny. As I decided to ask you that question in that moment, after knowing you for an hour or so, I knew that's what you were going to say. I knew that that's the way you were going to answer it. I knew you were going to say, you know what? I needed to go through that. It's almost like Back to the Future. It's like Marty McFly had to fucking, George had to knock out Biff. It couldn't be Marty that knocks out Biff. It's George that has to knock out Biff in the parking lot, after trying to grope, a lane. Like, that's what had to happen for you to get to where you are. You needed to go through that shit to be the man you are today.
When I work with clients, I see a lot of them. They're working with me, but they're actually still stuck in their own self-sabotage. And so again, that goes back to me not having expectations, because then I'm just going to get disappointed. So I just show up and I support them in the best way that I can. I give them guidance. I look at myself as like a way shower. I just show people a way, but I don't force them to go that way. I'm just like, here's your options. Like, you can go down option A, down your own path, and continue to sabotage, or you can take option B, and I can show you a new way, but that's ultimately up to you. And that's okay. If you want to go your own way and keep sabotaging yourself, that's great. Like, that thing that you're facing just needs to keep showing up in your life until you figure it out. And I can't fix that for you. Only you can fix that yourself.
So that's going to be on your gravestone one day, 100 years from now, is the way shower.
Yeah.
All right.
I hope so. I'm a way shower. That's how I see myself.
As I do these, I try to pull out little snippets of gold to be able to just tease it, or what am I going to call the episode? And I mean, I'll definitely hashtag the way shower. That should be part of your tagline. I believe in that. I just interviewed the bridge builder. I was talking. I was like, listen, you are a bridge builder, my man. This is what you're doing. So Alex, tell us a little bit about how we can find you, how we can work with you. How can people that are listening to this podcast find out more about you, your journey, those 5 pillars? Here's your opportunity to sell yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't been that active on social media for that long because I was so busy over the last 2 years building my personal training business. So now I'm doing life coaching. The best place to find me is on Facebook. You can just go to Alex Bales, Bales. Or you can also find me on Instagram at SoberFitAlex. Just send me a quick message or comment on one of my posts. And even if you're not interested in coaching, I'd still love to hear from you. And if you are interested in coaching, let's set up a call. I'll give you a call absolutely free. And we can see if me coaching you for 12 weeks would be something that would resonate and feel good to you.
It's awesome. It's been a pleasure, man. That hour flew by. Just hearing about your journey. I truly appreciate your level of transparency, authenticity, being able to be vulnerable. I mentioned before I started recording, I said, I've followed along now since we've met, and you've been putting a lot of stuff out there that you're just like, listen, this is me. I am not afraid to show who I truly am. And going back to your empathic nature, I think that is going to help people truly connect with you, and your message will resonate with so many that are dealing with a difficult spot in their life, because you've been there, done that, and you're not judging people. You're like, listen, I've gone through this. I can be there to reach a hand back and kind of help you out of that difficult spot and help you fill that hole that exists in your heart, because I was able to do that through these practices. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Could you imagine a world if everyone was just honest and authentic about who they truly were?
We'd be dancing in the streets, unicorns would be flying around, rainbows, and But I'll tell you what, though, as I think about your comment, if you could go back and have that conversation with yourself, I truly believe, and I'm actually going to do a post about this at some point. What we need to do is not rob our kids are, the next generation of their hardships. We can't rob them of those hardships that they're going to experience. When we rob people of their hardships, when we solve problems for people, for kids, it doesn't give them an opportunity to develop that resiliency and understand that they have the tools inside of them to solve those problems.
Mm-hmm.
So what you did was you figured out how to do that. You figured out how to fill that hole through practices, through mindset, through spirituality. And you did it yourself. And that's one of the most impressive things about you, is that, while you had support, it was everything came from inside of you. So that, I'm trying to determine, was that hole in your heart filled with things that you put in there, or did that just grow from you from inside? It's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think it grew from inside, and it grew over time. Every little thing in my life played a role. My life has played out completely perfectly, just as I would want it to.
Yep.
And I agree with you about the hardships as well. If we didn't have hardships, and most importantly, if we didn't have death, there would be no meaning or purpose to life. Those things provide meaning and purpose in our lives. And death is our greatest asset. Most people don't realize that. You can die to who you were yesterday or 15 minutes ago. Like, I think Jim Carrey said, like, depression means you need to take a deep rest to the character you've been trying to play. And pain, I call them the pain teachers. And I got that from a mentor of mine, Paul Chuck. He says pain shows up in our life to teach us things. And that's the thinking that I subscribe to. So I agree with you. And I'd say let that hole in your heart grow big. Just go and fuck it up big time, because the more you fuck it up, the better opportunity you have to come back and be an even stronger version of yourself.
It's funny. Jim Carrey has been quoted more times on this podcast than any other person. I'm going to reach out to him. Maybe he'll jump on a podcast with me.
That would be sick. Yeah.
So Alex Bales, thank you so much, my man. It's truly a pleasure. I'm inspired by you and your journey, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck. We will see you next time on Building Men.
Absolutely. Thank you.